Hello, good to see you. Welcome to our cat. I'm Lee, if it's the first time you've joined us. Got a couple of views already, which is brilliant. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So yeah, today's another Art Cat Day. We're going to be chatting about art in general, and more specifically about your art. I'm going to switch on Instagram as well, so bear with me 1 second whilst I do that. So it's just checking connection. There, hello Instagram world. So yes, today we are live on Instagram, Facebook and Twitch. Hopefully all the channels are up. I've got a bit of background echo on something, so I'm going to just double check for 1 second which channel is still producing audio. That one, YouTube. So yeah, so today I was literally going to talk to everybody about your artwork. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's been going on in the studio, about what we've been doing. So Sophie May just joined us on Instagram. Hello. So we're going live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch and Instagram all at the same time. I got the picture that we started last week, this one. So that was finished and done. That was for the Treccles Art Supplies, had a little competition that was running, reproducing a picture done by Sean Cheetham, and I picked up, there was like 3 you could pick, and I chose this one that he produced. It's a picture called Kate, so that was done. Kate Squires, hello, good to see you. Well, I can't actually see you, you can see me. So we're going to be talking today just literally about what's been going on in my studio, some of the things I've changed in the painting, some of the problems that you face when you come to changing things in the aspects of your artwork that you might not particularly like, or problems that you might be having in general. So I do need you guys out there today to converse and have a conversation. So basically tell me about what it is you're producing, what artwork you're doing yourself, the style of work that you particularly enjoy doing, the concepts behind your work, issues that you may be having, struggling with in your studio, just maybe your practice. Hey Kate Squires on Instagram. Really good to see you. So yeah, it's very much down to you today. I will be talking a little bit about the artwork that I'm producing in this painting, and also this drawing as a follow-on from last week. Just to let people know what's happening basically in the studio and what we're doing. So it is very much down to you guys. The more you ask questions, the more you chat and say hello, the better the conversation is. It can deviate onto different topics. I don't mind that. If it does that, that's fine. So again, sorry for all the different camera angles and formats and things. So some of you got a close-up of this work and a part of my head over on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch. Instagram, you've got a slightly better view at the moment. So this artwork that I've got here is the finished version of what I started last Saturday, drawing. So you saw very much the sketchy side of it, getting the forms and the structures, and you could see how even in that small 2-hour period how much the portrait changed. So if you missed that video, you can find it on, scroll down on YouTube and find it in the links from Facebook and Twitch and things. It was very angular to begin with, and it was a much softer finish in the end result. I'm going to zoom you in a little bit closer on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch. Sadly, I can't really do that with Instagram because I might perhaps hold it closer, but because it's just a one camera and I've got it set up already, I can't move you around too much. It's one of the frustrations that when you're kind of doing a multi-format stream, I can't kind of zoom you in and out as well. So I'm going to zoom you in a little bit closer on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch, and you'll see some of the detailing of how I've done the contouring of the face and things, and that kept changing all the way through the picture. Looking at different edges, some were sharper, let's see, around her forehead, and some were softer, so where light kind of disappeared into, say, where the chin down here, there wasn't such a hard line, and it's graduating the tonal shift from a light to a dark, and sometimes in the darks there's a subtle hint of light as well. But it's to give you the overall aspect of form. Now, the form can be anything that you're trying to represent. But what I was interested in the process as well was the abstract nature of rendering things. That yes, it's a representational image of a girl holding the collars up on her jacket, and some can say, oh, it's very, very lifelike. But when you look closer and you go into a picture, you can see some of the abstract nature. So if I zoom that down a little bit, I'm going to bring this closer to you, Instagram, so you'll be able to see a little bit closer up. Some of the mark making and the shapes and the images, I don't know if you remember last week where we talked about this kind of funnel, upside down funnel shape as a highlight underneath her neck. When you look out of context, not thinking about a neck but just a shape, it starts to feel like it's abstracted. It's an aspect of the image. It's a representational part of it. But looking at it out of context of subject matter, as in it's a part of her neck, you can just break it down to a simple shape, and then break that simple shape down to its more basic elements, like its structures and forms and edges and tones and tonal shifts. So the more minutiae you go into, the more detailed your picture will be, but sometimes the more abstract in its nature as well. I had great fun doing the buttons on this as well, because they all appear like little round buttons, but when you look at them more closely, you can see that they become more angular. If I'm just going to literally bring this a little bit closer forward for Instagram, just so they can get a join in on this as well. So bear with us, Facebook, Instagram and Twitch. But you can see how angular the buttons are. They actually look like, if you're in the UK, you know what a 50p piece looks like. That sort of hexagonal shape. And some of the detailing around her face, if we move that closer, you can see how I've kind of structured those lines and marks to give the illusion of form and tonal shift. And it's very much the textures started to read the shapes and read the image as a representational figure. So it's breaking those things down. So that's basically that one done. It was good fun, I enjoyed doing it. It'd be interesting to see, or it was interesting to see, and still is interesting to see, if you go to the Treacle Art Supply website and have a look for the hashtag, I think it's Treacle Cheatham. They have details on their Facebook, Instagram page, and hit their hashtag. You'll see everybody's responses and how different they all were, and that's what's interesting about art. These little kind of sideline projects are interesting to do as just a practice in your artwork, to kind of take you away from the pure concentration about your own artwork, but they're a useful tool, I think, for me personally, about how, I'm zooming out there on Instagram, sorry, on Facebook, Twitch and YouTube, just so you get a slightly better image. Sorry, my head's in the shot there. But these little working exercises are quite good in the way that sometimes where you struggle with your own pictures or your own artwork, to take an exercise break away from your practice, so you can put some of your concentration on to something else, can keep you creatively, keep the creative flow going, whereas you might be struggling with that creative flow in your artwork. That helps you re-engage with it in another way. Another project we did, you may have seen a couple of weeks ago, was this one. From the, I think it's a Brave Art Gallery. There was a little sort of online challenge to produce a picture of a composer. Each month they have a new picture and a new challenge to do, so that was just a pencil one in my sketchbook. And again, to see people's different responses, because the actual image was black and white, and the responses came from lots of different artists and lots of different medias and different formats. And it was interesting to see how they took the challenge of manipulating the black and white image into something that was colourful, and the sensitivity of how that was done, and also the structures and about how they placed different textures in the backgrounds and played with different colours in the face, and different people using the similar media to what I would have used, doing it in pencil or charcoal, and how they tackled the similar issues that I may have faced. So it's interesting with doing a process of analysis in your work to kind of reflect back on how you do things. Oh, you have to shoot? Kate, that's no problem. Thanks for coming. Hopefully, now we're all allowed out into the real world, we can all catch up for a coffee, probably outside on a cold bench in Northern Ireland where it's not raining sometime. But yeah, it'd be good to see you. So yeah, it's very much about that conversation today. Is about how you sometimes hit a brick wall with your work, or you can't quite see what's wrong with it, or you don't know how to change something, or you know there's something you need to change and you don't quite know how to go around it, or there's that fear as well that you kind of what you have to do, but you're kind of resenting having to do it because it's going to change the picture and it's going to put more work into it. But I always take it back to, what was your aim? What was it you wanted to do? And if you can see there's something that needs developing in our work, taking that brave step to change your work in a way is what needs to be done. And sometimes you kind of have to work yourself up to that process, or work yourself into that mindset to take that bull by the horns and actually paint the change. And I've done that quite a lot with this picture behind me, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I do really want to hear about your artwork, about the challenges that you face in your work, because I think that's an important conversation both ways. It's good for me to hear about it, and it's good for other people to listen to it as well. So if you're on in any of the different formats watching this, you can type up in the comments and I'll relay back to where it's coming from, and we'll have that conversation. If you don't want to talk about it and you don't chat about it, this is going to be quite a brief, short art cat today. So yeah, the more you talk, the more long this is going to last. So I'm going to talk about this picture behind me that I've been working on. You may have been following this over the last few months, really. It was a project called Mammalian where I interviewed a lot of people. Kate was one of them. Kate's pictures kind of planned what I want to do, and it kind of stalled for a while because my painting quality wasn't quite where I wanted it to be, so I had to kind of practice. And like I was saying, through doing other exercises and different painting challenges, it re-engaged me with the whole process, and it made me revisit the image that I kind of created to a stage, to analyse what was wrong with it and how do I break that down, and how do I fix some of the problems that I had created in its composition and also the painting quality of it, and then taking that the next stage was actually producing the better work and to change some of the things. So I did a painting shortly before this one, which is again another part of the Mammalian series, where I interviewed a bunch of my friends about 2 years ago now, and I did a pencil portrait of them at that time, and I was going to then create a series of paintings based on a conversation, just that conversation. The only question I asked each person was, if you were an animal, what would it be? And they all chose their animal for different reasons, and I created the composition around that conversation. So things that were maybe talked about in an abstract sense have found their way into the composition, and some of those elements I had to think about, how do I actually formally put them together, because they don't exist in real life. I mean, Julie's carrying a black horse there, and that didn't happen, She wasn't carrying an umbrella lit from the inside. She wasn't stood on this landscape at a crossroads. That wasn't in existence. So I'm creating things out of imagination that have been based around a reality of a conversation, which is quite an abstract thing. So there's lots of invention, but it has to follow its own set of rules. So it has to follow the rules within this picture, and it has to make sense within this picture to make sense of it, if that makes sense. Lots of sense. So it's a quite surreal, abstract way of thinking. It's almost like if you were to remember something, you don't remember the minutiae of every bit of detail. You kind of get a gloss over memory of something. And it's to pick those elements out and put them back into the artwork. So initially, when I did this picture, I'm going to slide out the way a little bit just so you can see this. I don't know if you remember, when this, you can check this out on Instagram as well, because you'll see pictures of this particular painting. At a stage it got to, I thought I was quite happy with it. It was still a work in progress, but I was kind of getting there, and it just kind of stopped and failed because things were fundamentally wrong with it, and I was subconsciously aware of it, and that's what was holding me back. At the time, her hand and arm came out at this point and held a horse that sat about here, and it was physically impossible for her to do that. So I knew the structure of her body and her arm, etc., all had to change. I had to drop the horse down. I had to change its position to fit on her hand, leading up to her forearm. I had a crossroads that was initially down here, which went along this way and up that way, which made it very geometrically impossible and perspectively impossible for it to fit in this landscape. And I wanted to feel like it was a believable image where she did actually belong in this landscape. The crossroads that I've kind of blocked back in now, again, initially was going up in this direction, and then it was going off in that direction. I changed that a couple of weeks ago, and it just seemed too extreme. You know, the point of perspective was really harsh, and it took her again out of the landscape and became a jarring effect. So I had to kind of like change that as well. So I've moved that back around. I've moved this back up. I moved the horizon line up. I moved the top of her head down. I've repainted her face. It's not in detail at the moment, but it's more of that blocky stage is where I had that drawing of picture of Kate. And there's lots of elements to change and restructure, and one thing has an effect on another thing, and it's almost like a domino effect. It's like you change this and the next bit changes, the next bit changes, and it feels initially like there's a tsunami of errors that suddenly show themselves up. And at that stage, I think what can happen is you can feel like you're panicking. It's like, if that's wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong, oh, I'm wrong, my picture's wrong, I can't paint anymore. Is to take that pressure off yourself. You are literally making better judgments, and that's a better way of looking at it. That if you are finding errors in your work and you need to change them, if you take them one step at a time and if they follow on to something else needing change, then change that at the next stage, and change the next thing at the next stage, and sit back and reflect on it. Eventually those dominoes realign themselves and they'll stand up in a row again, and you have a better picture because you've taken that time. So not being afraid to change something is quite an important aspect. Yes, sometimes you can change so much that, say, the integrity of the paper starts to, just get overworked, and you change the picture again. Flexibility about painting in oils, that you do have that element where you can take paint off and you can reapply it again. Excuse me. So I'm lucky in that respect, but there'd be nothing wrong if I got to a stage and went, do you know what, I can paint this better on a new canvas, and got one up and repainted it, taking on board all of the positive changes that I'd made and put them into the next painting. I would get to this stage an awful lot quicker. but it's not about necessarily about speed. But I wouldn't be making the same mistakes to get to the right outcome, if you know what I mean. So, got a couple of people there joined us over on Instagram. Got Art and Home Framing Department. Hey, you're open again, which is great, because COVID and some of the restrictions in Northern Ireland have been relaxed, so people can go shopping again. So I think Saturday was probably your first full day back with open doors, was it? Fingers crossed that went well for you. We've got Cody Art and I as well. Hello, over on Instagram. So it's literally today talking about you and your artwork and how you face changes and change some of the things in your artwork that you need to change, or trying to find a way to identify. You might, like I did with this picture, subconsciously know that there's something not quite right, and it's how do you find what that is? How do you find that out? Often when people are doing, say, a portrait that has a likeness to it, there are certain elements which work well. Say, for example, an eye, and you're quite pleased with it, and you're happy with it. It's probably the best eye you've ever drawn. And then when you look at it in conjunction with the rest of the face, you realise it might be just subtly off to one side, and there's a reluctance to move it or rub it out and draw it again, because it's a really good eye. So two things have got to happen. You've either got to shift the entire picture around to fit that eye, or you do have to be brave and rub it out and draw it as well, again in the right position. So excuse me. Part of the way I structured that picture last week, when I was drawing the picture of Sean Cheatham's Kate, was just marking little dots first. There was still loads of adjustment that went on throughout the drawing, but I had a better location of about where things were, locations of eyes and noses and edges of faces and things like that, and I worked that kind of geometric pattern out throughout the process, and then did the same thing when it came to rendering a form, looking where the breaks and the lights and the shadows were, how a strong highlight broke into a subtle tonal shift, and then going into what might be a core shadow or reflected light, and looking for those areas of shapes as well, and doing very much the same process as I worked out where the proportions of a head was, say the top of the head, the bottom of the chin. I worked out the same proportions each stage for those shadow shifts or light shifts, and mapped them out as well, and then started to lightly block in what was light and what was dark, and then looking at the sort of transition between the lights and the darks. So they're not always as harsh. That gives you a very geometric, blocky, very angular looking image, which is, if it's something that you want to go for, that's fine. But if you're looking for the subtlety in say changing the light on a face, for example, because our faces aren't necessarily geometric, we might have hard and soft shapes in certain areas, say under our nostrils or around the corners of our eyes and things like that. If you're looking for those soft, subtle changes in light and shadow, sometimes it can be quite subtle, but it's how one light changes into a darkness, and it can be about the experimentation with the medium. And I'll kind of give a little tip that I often have a page or a canvas sat beside me that I kind of work out the brush strokes first, or I work out the texture on a separate piece of paper, just the texture, not about the form or the shape of the head or a hand or what a fingernail looks like, but literally how the texture of something looks. And I try to get that experiment to work for me, so I can then build confidence into applying it to a structure like an umbrella or a hand or a horse or whatever it is. So therefore I'm not ever concerned about not being able to draw a particular thing like a hand or a foot or a nose. Um, I'm more concerned about the structures of it and how it looks in texture and how it looks in light. An interesting tip I picked up this week was when people are painting highlights on paintings, particularly, if they keep the highlights quite flat, they appear quite dull. If they're painting a highlight that's quite textured, it can feel quite bright because it almost stands out. So when you're mixing the colour up on your palette, depending on the type of rendering or finish you're looking for, can affect the tonal qualities of your paint. So if you've got quite a textured surface and you've mixed up a bright colour, it's going to appear brighter. So when you apply it to the painting with a textured mark, it'll suddenly look, you'll think, I spent ages mixing it up on my palette, but it looks way too bright on my canvas. It's because of the textural quality of it. If it's got a smoother quality, it might feel slightly dull and flat. So it's about choice, about the type of finish that you're looking for in your work. That comes down to your research, that comes down to your preferences as an artist about the overall outcome that you'd like to achieve in your work. That can come from research, that can come from looking at lots of different artists' work to see which one really resonates with you and how you can choose elements from different artists' work, choose elements from your own experimentations and how you mash them together with your concept idea, with your painting style, and how you curate them into your picture. McVicker35 just joined us over on Instagram. Hello. So yeah, that's what we're talking about today, is about your artwork and what it is you're doing. So please do join the conversation. Tell me what it is about your concepts behind your work. You can talk about your processes. You can talk about some of the issues that you might be facing with your artwork. It can be about literally the physicality of doing the artwork or how you come into a studio. We've all had days, I've had days like that this week, where your brain is frazzled and to sit down there with the concentration and focus to paint or draw, it isn't quite there. Like your mind is just been chewed up from doing something else in the day. And what do you do at that stage? Even if it's something to help you later on, like tidying up your studio space, it can seem like a procrastination. I know it sounds like procrastination, but I think it's an important aspect. If you are working on a regular basis as a painter or an artist or drawer or printer or whatever it is, if you've got a day that's really frazzled your brain, still go into your studio, even if you're going to sit down and sit in front of the artwork that you're looking at and just reflect on it. It can be about tidying up your studio space. It can be about ordering new stock. It can be about just sitting and researching. And so you're not necessarily physically working on your artwork, but you're still putting yourself in that mindset. And if that's a regular occurrence where that feels like it's a part of your process, that's really going to help you. We've got somebody over there on Twitch saying, I'm deeply convinced that the final piece of any art is just a bonus. What is important is the process of creation, the time focused on it. It's good for our minds to focus on something that's not jumping everywhere. Yep, and learn from the process after making mistakes. Absolutely, it's a good. It's an ongoing process. It is never one thing. So I'm glad you pop that over on Twitch. The end outcome of your artwork. I think we talked about this last week. How do you know when a picture is finished? Well, we often say, look, I can often change this and tweak it, because as you progress, your experience grows and you become your own better artist. You can look back and reflect on what you've done, even within a painting, and see how far you've moved forward in your work, which is great, which is where we should really, I feel, always try to be, is constantly pushing what we're capable of. And that process of creating something is an important one. It allows you to get out of your head all the imagery and thought processes down onto paper or canvas or whatever, or clay or whatever it is, and get it out visibly in front of you, so you can then reflect on it and move and change to do the next picture. So, very good point. I think if you're trying to change and change and change and change and change for the sake of change, that's where it can be problematic, because you're not satisfying anything at all, where you need to satisfy some of your goals. And it can just be about how you're handling colour. It can be just about the textural quality of your paint. It can be about the compositional changes that you've changed to create the work that you want, that you can see in your mind's eye, basically. So it's a bit of a balance, really, between yes, having a goal to try and achieve something, a picture, but allowing yourself to be flexible through it, to allow it to develop and grow. I've had pictures that I've done in the past where there's been elements in it that I hadn't seen at the time, not that they were wrong, but there were elements that had picked up on a subconscious idea that were relevant in the picture, and I've only been able to recognise them through time and reflection through doing other artwork. So when I look back at them, I can see them with a fresh pair of eyes and a fresh sense of perspective. Not that the artwork changed, I changed. So my relationship with my own work can change through a period of time. So when you reflect back on when you did a particular piece of work, it's almost like listening to a piece of music, where it can take you back to a time and a feeling and a certain emotional state, a happy memory as a kid, when you could hear pop music of that era, and it'll take you back to almost the sounds and the smells and the tastes of that time. Artwork's no different. As you've done a picture, and if it sits in your sketchbook or sits in your studio or sits on a gallery wall somewhere, when you revisit it, you still have a connection with it, because you're obviously the one who created it, but you're also taken to a different time, about who you were at that stage, and you can see then how much you've grown. This is why I kind of say to people, look, don't chuck your work away that's not worked particularly well. It's good to almost have it there as an aid to help you see how far you've moved on, how far you've grown as an artist, how far your concepts may have developed or have been refined. There may be elements in it which you kind of discarded because the image wasn't great, but there might be elements of it which really worked well, which you can now see, because that kind of hyper-focused sense of failure when something doesn't work well is kind of diminished with time, and then if you look at it, you can see it with a fresh pair of eyes and go, terrible image, but I love the quality of the paint I used for the sky, for example, and you can take that back out and reintroduce it back into the work that you're doing now, and currently in your work. So this is where we're talking about. So thank you very much, Popbat. I really appreciate that. I think it's still, we're kind of always in search of something new for ourselves when we create a painting. Not that necessarily you're doing anything groundbreakingly different that other artists have done. The internet is vast and wide, and if you typed in something really obscure, you would find an image that somebody's created to do with it. There'll be other artists working in a similar genre as you, and rather than waiting till you find the one thing that has never been done before, you probably will never get there, because there will probably be somebody throughout the history of time, or the vast numbers of artists out there creating artwork now, somebody else will be working on a similar conceptual theme. Not that they're going to create the same artwork, it's not that they're copying what you're doing, but they'll be working along it. Might be coming from a different point of view, but the outcome of what they create has a similar thread. And I think it's really good to connect with other artists who work in a similar vein, because you build that sense of ideological kind of community. It gives you options. It gives you options to share information. It gives you options to probably collaborate and show together. Um, it's interesting even having a conversation, so you can bounce off your different perspective on a similar subject matter about what you see and what they see. So it's using those analytical tools that way as well to really enhance your work. It can build connections with artists who can give you a true, honest perspective about how maybe your ideas and concepts are translated through what you do, how they come across, how your message in your artwork, does it translate, does it achieve what it is you want to achieve. Often I find sometimes when you do a piece of artwork, you put it out there, and although your conceptual side of your artwork might be fully resolved, and the artwork that you've done you're pleased with, and an individual looking at your artwork might not get what you've necessarily intended, but they will come up with a different perspective about it, which can really be inspirational. And so it's not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, it's to keep your mind open as to the responses that people have to your work. Not everybody's going to like everything that you do. There will be people who just go, I just really don't like the way you've done that image, or it's too weird. I get that an awful lot. Why is that person holding a horse? That's silly. You know, they'd like something that's a little bit more formal and more based in a certain sense of reality. That's fine. It's a different perspective and a different flavour of work. What I'm more considerate to is how people's conversations happen around art, and how people feel relaxed in talking about what they do in a much more open and communicative way. This is one of the reasons why I like ArtCat, is that when people engage and talk about their different perspectives on art, we can set ourselves almost like a little guide, a little rule set. But even with that, keep it flexible, that it can shift around a little bit. If you nail gun yourself into a box and say, this is what I do, and this is the only way I do things, you can actually be set yourself up with like a little cell that you can't get out of. You're not allowing yourself to explore and experiment and stay open to different types of influences and see different elements that you can kind of adopt and approach and put into your work. So keeping that element of flexibility in your work is quite, for me, I think it's quite important. It keeps you fresh, it keeps your eyes constantly reviewing what you do and applying it to your goals. So for example, if you have a goal of doing a portrait, don't start drawing a fish unless the fish is relevant. If you kind of you curate what it is you want to achieve, and having that mindset is to see the qualities in it, make sure that they're there in your picture, and if they're not, ask the question to yourself, did it work because I changed my focus and that the outcome is better because of it, or did I just go off track and I've created a different picture and I still haven't answered what it was I initially wanted to do, which was a portrait. So what I'm asking you is about your artwork. What is it that you love in your work? What is it you like to do in your work? Because we often kind of set that aside and concentrate on the errors or problems in our work. But I'd like to hear the conversation about the real cathartic, positive process of being an artist, is doing what you want. Whether your artwork has a huge social political focus, which is very relevant of now, or whether it's more holistic about a process of imagery that you've curated over a period of time because it's based on how you see the visual medium. Your concepts can very heavy and weighty, or may appear, and I'll say appear, to be superficially focused on a broad outcome, but the quality of the painting can be quite nuanced and focused. So if you hear somebody saying I'm really engaged with how light falls on objects, it's a huge subject matter. It can be on anything. But if that picture really does contain those elements of light falling on an object, and you see the next one, it's about light falling on an object and how light falls on textures and how light falls on form and all these different elements, you can see that that concept is answered, but in lots of different nuanced ways. If it's, say, about the political stability of a particular thing that's happening right now, which might be relevant this week, by the time you finish that painting, it's changed to be something else, then how relevant is that concept? It's just a captured moment in time. It's not to say that it's wrong to do that. What I'm saying is it's how heavy or weighty or big or small your concept is relevant to what it is you want it to be. So don't get hooked up on it. And it comes back to that thing about trying to find the sense of newness. If it's new to you and relevant and challenging to you and excuse me, has your interest or your focus, that's the important thing. It doesn't matter about anybody else. You should answer your own briefs and your own concepts. There's lots of elements within this picture that I need to change and refine, and it is almost going back to kind of like where it got to was a couple of stages ahead of where it is now, but was not necessarily correct because of its structures. And its outcome wasn't quite there, and seeing that, having to change it, has taken the picture back lots of steps, but moved it on artistically lots of steps forward. El Passon just joined us over on Instagram. Hello. So Brian Jojo, hello. You just joined us over on the Twitch. So we're talking about your artwork today, and about some of the things that you're doing artistically, conceptually. Your practice, how you create, where you create. Love to find out where you guys are from, what's your local art scene like, what's going on in your part of the world, and what challenges or successes that you're having as well. That's always interesting to hear about. So the more you talk about those, the better the conversation is, basically. So you don't have to listen to me kind of just rant on about stuff, because it's not. I always find the sound of my own voice quite monotonous. So the more questions that you ask, is great. Comment there from Popbat over on Twitch, who's talking about, we were talking about art in general, about how you kind of curate it and finish it off. He was saying about he's convinced that the final piece of any art is just a bonus. A lovely way of putting it. What is important to them is the process of creation, and the time focused on it. It's good for our minds to focus on something that's not jumping everywhere, which it is. It's this very cathartic thing where you can kind of quieten down the rest of world life, and it allows you just to be in one place at one time, doing one thing. And if you're just making a mark, or painting, or drawing, it's very cathartic. That you sort of help yourself sort of quieten all the rush of the day, or the pace of life, or all the other tumultuous things that can be going on, and how you can kind of just quieten them down, put them in place 1 second. It helps you get perspective on them for later. It's quite a cathartic thing to do. So yeah, tell me about your artwork. Tell me what you do. Tell me about any good artistic things that are going on that you've come across on the internet. I've come across lots of podcasts recently. There's the Painting Guide over on Instagram, well worth checking out. Got some really good interviews with some really good painters. There's a couple of artists that do a great chat on a Friday night which you can check them out. Dan Ferguson and Emmanuel Mani D'Souza, manual artist. So you can check them out as well. They're over on Instagram. There is John Dalton, Gently Does It. Interviews some amazing artists and really informal, friendly conversations. There's the Jealous Curator as well. There's brilliant interviews with artists, and it might seem kind of self-indulgent to do art all day, listen to art all day. You do need feeding from other elements of society as well. I'm not saying just surround yourself with artists in a little bubble and pretend the world doesn't exist. Allow other stuff to happen, but just listening to different art conversations as well is interesting because it helps you bounce or reflect back to you what you're about. So when another artist is talking about their process or their intent for their artwork, you can reflect back at that on yourself. That's how I listen to them. There might be in the background as I'm working, and you'll hear somebody talk about forms and colours and go, is that what I do? I don't do it that way. I never thought of doing it that way. And it will suddenly start to infuse your thought process. It kind of helps get you over a hump if you're having a creative block. I don't have creative blocks necessarily. I think sometimes the slowing down of the pace of my output of work is less to do about the enthusiasm to create something, and more to do with the recognition that I have to go off and deviate and learn something, take classes and investigate different processes to get to the qualities that I want to achieve that I might not be aware of at the beginning of doing an artwork. So listening to a podcast like that might just challenge me to a point of going, oh, the mistakes that they're talking about early on in their career is something that I'm actually doing right now and I wasn't aware of it, and now I can change it because I'm aware of it. So sometimes it's a bit like when you're learning to drive. This is my analogy. I've used this quite a lot in my sort of real life art classes. So that when you're learning to drive, you don't know what anything is or what anything does. You don't know what a clutch is, how hard to press it, how hard to turn the steering wheel, where the key goes in for the ignition. So you're cognitively aware of things that you don't know. And then you kind of pick up some certain things. Then you're kind of aware of your errors and things that you need to change. That you went to you didn't use the indicator when you went to pull out and you had an accident, so therefore you're hyper focused that every time you go to pull out into another lane you use the indicator and check your mirrors. So you're mechanically thinking of them, and then you get to a stage where it's become second nature and you're kind of just doing it. But through that process you might not be aware that you're still not that good at doing certain things, and yes, you've looked in the mirror and put the indicator on and pulled into the other lane, but you might have done it too fast and caused other traffic to kind of slow down, but you might be blissfully unaware of that and just think you're doing everything right. Through time you start to realise that there is an observance outside of the functionality of doing things, like an indicator, checking mirrors, where you start to appreciate other elements that are around, that where you slow down and you start to consider them, it makes you better. Again, it goes for that cognitive being aware of certain things, and then it becomes like a second nature to you. But there's always that element of just checking yourself every now and again. So my analogy goes into painting, where when you first start off you don't know which brush to use. You've got two brushes and you don't know which one's best to use because they're both brushes, so where one's big, one's small. Might take me longer to do it with a small brush, and I want to kind of get it done, so I'll use a big one. And you go with your paint, and you go, oh, it's not very detailed, and it's possibly because you should use this one. and you weren't aware of it at the time. So it goes through the same process where you don't know what these things are, then you get a relevance to them because you've used them a couple of times, and you start to feel which one's better for you to do certain things, and it answers the immediate problem about how to put paint on. But as you become more developed as an artist, you start to find all the nuances, and then you start to find how little techniques can help you, which makes you more aware of the outcome. And as you impart different bits of knowledge into it, you're refining and refining and refining your process, and it never really stops. I think the illusion is when we look observantly at other artworks and we can see the qualities in them which we admire, which we love in their artwork. They might be lacking in our own, and it's how we can adopt those elements and put them into our artwork. And that's not necessarily copying, because we're not copying the same picture, we're being influenced by them, and that's what we should be. We should be influenced by other artists and other musicians and other pieces of literature, and influenced by life around us. How can we use those things to curate into the pictures that we want to create? So that's what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter whether you're a realist, a surrealist, an impressionist, an abstract, an expressionist, or whatever your isms or ists are. It's a similar process, because that creative journey has a similar thread to it all the way through. It doesn't matter what your medium is, it doesn't matter what your process is, whether it is a musician, you're writing music lyrics, how you curate your art. What is it you want to say? And sometimes it's very hard to verbalize that. I think having conversations is a good way around it, because in a conversation you're not necessarily trying to have a one sentence answer in like an elevator pitch, which can seem a bit overly curated sometimes. Often people say, what do you do? And you say, I'm an artist. And you say, what type of art do you do? Is an expression. And you say, I'm a portrait artist. And they go, what type of portraits do you do? And they're just being generally interested. And then if you to suddenly jump into all the nuanced elements about what face and portraiture might be, it might not interest them at all. So it's about your audience, about who you're talking to. But when you're in an environment like this, and we're talking about art in general, you're answering your own questions about your own artistic journey, about what's relevant to you right now. And verbally just describing it, it helps you kind of refine your focus on it, about what it is you actually do. You can develop that kind of slick elevator pitch to answer those questions when you ask them at parties and things like that, or in interviews. But it only goes so far, and the next stage is about engaging with the people you're having a conversation with, about what is it they want to know, what is it they actually are asking about. Obviously when you listen to these different art podcasts and broadcasts and things, it is about art that they're creating. So it's interesting to see how deep or people allow themselves to go with their answers. I found the ones most interesting are the ones that are just relaxed about it and just honest about what it is they do as an artist. They're not trying to be too clever, they're not trying to project an image about who they are or how worthy their artwork is. It can literally be from the heart and be very deceptively simple about what it is their artwork's about, but the outcome of it is incredibly rich. So those are the kind of artists that kind of really inspire me. What type of artists inspire you? That's what I'd like to ask you. So tell me about the artists that really float your boat. Tell me about the types of people who really make you go wow when you look at their artwork. It can be somebody that you personally know that the whole world hasn't heard about. Good place to share it right now. it can be about just your source of inspiration as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be about another artist. It can be about the subject matter or the way that you do your artwork. That could be interesting as well. So Kerry Ann Lyons just joined us. Hello. And Shane Loughran Art, you just joined us. And Rachel Bride. Hello, Rachel. El Paston, you joined us as well over on Instagram. So yeah, today is very much more a chatty day about, rather than me doing a demonstration. I started doing one last week, and for those of you who did, we talked about it initially right at the very beginning. I started this portrait last week and finished it off after the broadcast. It took about 4 or 5 hours, and it could be, I know even now that I could refine that even further and make it more nuanced, but I got to a stage where I was just interested in the textures of it and the kind of sculptural element of drawing it. It kind of answered that question, and as a drawing exercise it got me kind of more enthused about doing my painting, doing my own artwork. So again, doing these little challenges that we often find dotted around all over Instagram. The one from the Brave Fine Art Gallery, which was a Coleridge painting, who was, I'll show you here. They do one each month, so I think they've got a new one coming out. They've just chosen their winner for this week, for this month's challenge. Jenny Booth, I think, was the painter. A beautiful painting. I'll show you my effort. Oh, find it. Hang on. So my effort was that one. I'll hopefully try and get you a better shot of it. It was done in pencil. So doing these different challenges are quite fun because it just allows you to play with your process. It allows you to play with your mediums. You haven't got the pressure necessarily of delivering it anywhere for an exhibition or commission. It can literally be the exercise itself which inspires you to do or engage with your artwork. And those have certainly helped me over lockdown to engage with these mammalian portraits and change some of the aspects of it. So when people sort of hit that acknowledgement that there's something not quite right in the picture and how do they go about changing it, rather than focus on the thing like the nose or the ear or the foot or the hand that they can't draw, is to set that aside and look at the quality of your picture. How did you get to the stage where you needed to change things? And when you become aware of them, that's when you can really affect change. That's when you can really pick up the elements that you need to adjust in your work. So yeah, that's where we're at. I was going to keep on chatting and talking about my painting a little bit if you want to hear about that. And it's got better. I mean, there's still an awful lot to change within this picture. It's got a whole lot more refinement to do. It's gone back several stages prior to where it was before I started to change things around, but it's a better picture for it because this figure now, I feel, feels like it belongs in this landscape, whereas before it was almost like it was cut out and stuck onto a landscape, which didn't quite work. Performance drawing, hello. You've just joined us on Instagram, and Mike D-Ring, who joined us on Instagram too. We're also going live on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch. So hello to you guys as well. Got different cameras set up for different places. So yeah, tell me about your artwork. Tell me about the process that you're doing. If you've got any good tips or good information regarding about what's going on the internet, arts-wise, different TV programs that might be going live that might not be able to be aware about, or we can access them on the internet. Tell us about those too, so we can share them about. At the minute, this picture, she looks like she's kind of stood on this kind of riverbank. This is not a river. This will actually be a road. It's going to be a crossroads. But to make the contrast when I was painting it, I had to use it could have been pink or blue or bright red, but I needed to literally redraw where the boundaries of this picture were, so it helped shift and change the composition of it. The structure of this horse changed from being up here somewhere, which was too short because it was sat in a hand, which meant her elbow was way too high, and dropping her elbow down, dropping her arm down meant the horse had to change. The composition of the horizon line initially was, I think, about here. I've moved up, which has placed her deeper into the landscape itself. This whole sky was black at one stage, and I've created this little bit of highlight on one side of a sky to give a sense of depth as well, which gave a believability to the landscape that she was in. I changed the hand because it was too small. It was better painted, but it was too small. Now I can refine the structure of this hand to get to the same quality of the painting, the hand I had before, but it will make the hand better. I've changed the structure of the umbrella, so how the umbrella actually fits in a hand and curves around and comes back out again, which have a knock-on effect to where the actual umbrella part will come out and go into the umbrella and the angle of it. The top of her head I've brought down. It was initially up here, and I've brought it down to here, which gives you a better size in proportion with the rest of the body. I've started to kind of pop in some very loose changes in the textures of the background. Light's coming in from this direction, therefore light on the land is going to be lighter on this side than it is on this side, but it'll pick up different nuances about hedgerows, textures of quality of the land surface as well. What else changed? Oh, it's going to change. Her elbow and arm changed. I repainted all that early on this week, and obviously changed the painting on the form of her hand and arm on this side, because this was all up here at one stage. And through adopting all of those elements and facing them and changing them was quite daunting. You know, you get to a certain stage of your painting where you go, yeah, this is okay, but it's just okay, and I don't know quite why it's just okay and not good. It was to do with the literal posture and positioning of things, and the quality of the paintings were okay, but they weren't connected with the rest of the painting, so they started to jar. So the hands and the face were all different colours. Now, I'm not necessarily just saying tonally different colours, because obviously one might be further away from the light source, therefore it will be darker. But they were a different palette of paint as well, so it really looked weird that the size and structure of one hand up here being small, and this hand being big down here, and then the face being too pale in conjunction with this very colourful hand. All these things were jarring, and I couldn't see them because I was doing them at the time. And standing back and reflecting back on it, and taking away that process of telling myself off. Oh, that's wrong, and this is wrong, and that's bad, and you're a terrible artist. Why are you bothering to do that? We all have that inner voice, and you just have to quieten it down. If there are things wrong in your picture, it's okay. You can change them. I can change them as I go along. You are allowed to pick up and paint over, or turn over a page and redraw. There's nothing wrong in that. There's a kind of a very high expectation of ourselves when we're doing our artwork, to get it right, to be right all of the time, every single time. I mean, if you're not, you berate yourself, and that's an unachievable task, to be right all the time. And you can build your practice up to be more successful more often, to achieve certain qualities in your work, to work things out, and to allow yourself to acclimatise to them and just enjoy the process of painting or drawing, to creating your pieces of artwork. But we're constantly developing as well. Even through practice, you develop and refine without even consciously knowing about it, that you will push you on into new areas at some stage. But where we kind of focus ourselves on the errors of our work, they can be demoralizing, and I don't think that's necessarily a good practice. So it's how you really get over that hump of challenge in your work. How do you get over the that kind of crushing tsunami of oh my god, I can't do this, because we've all had it. And this is what I wanted to say a little bit today, to be a little bit more reassuring that we all go through this process, but we can help each other out by giving ourselves little indicators about how we can actually acclimatise to it. How can you change it? How do you get across that hump? For some, it's just an acknowledgement and a moving on, and not carrying the weight of an error with you. That kind of berating ourselves. Just drop it. Just put that bag down. If you made an error and you've changed it, good. You've changed it and you've moved on. You've grown as an artist. If you're constantly thinking about how bad something was and no, that wasn't good, it might stop your enthusiasm for painting and drawing the next picture. So it's to make your process and your enjoyment of creating be that more often. So Mike Drayton, you've joined us over on Instagram as well. Hello to you. So tell me about your artwork. Tell me about your things that you're creating. The more people that sort of join in and kind of switch off. I know what Instagram's like as well, where you kind of go, oh, what's that? Listen to 5 minutes, switch off. That's fine. That's the way social media goes, and it's the same for Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. If you don't have the time to do that now, that's fine. I get it. But if you want to send a message, not a problem. It'd be lovely to hear from you. Got a different request there on. That was a more personal request on Facebook. I thought it was a question there on art. So yeah, got a few people there out. I think it's actually Michael often joins us as well. I think it's his birthday today, so happy birthday to Michael. If you're watching on catch up, hope you had a good day. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to talk about today. Next week I'm going to be throughout this process I'm going to be carrying this picture until it's done, and then moving on to the next one. I've got my canvas for the next picture set up, which I might start drawing out. I kind of like to work on a couple of pictures at the same time, just so I can bounce from one to another. So if I get stuck or frustrated with one picture, I can be more productive and change my focus and work on another one, which helps me reflect back on the initial painting. So this is another tip, if you like, about how to work around a problematic painting or drawing that you might be having. So I've got my canvas ready to start working on the next mammalian project. So I need to kind of start to draw that out too. Angela, you've just joined us over on YouTube. I don't know what happened to Facebook. That seems to have switched itself off. I don't know if it's caught itself back up yet. I don't know. It was stumbling a little while back. So yeah, Angela, we're just talking today about not necessarily you, but we are talking about you and your artwork, and about what it is you're doing at the moment. Some of the challenges that you're facing in your artwork, and some of the practices. What is you are working on or would like to work on for your ideas and concepts. It's funny, you started off early on in your art career. When you're starting to muse about something, you're kind of reluctant to tell anybody about it just in case they steal your idea. And I was chatting earlier on about how 9 times out of 10 there are also thousands of other people working on a similar thing to you, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to talk about your initial musings about an idea, because you can often make connections with other people, plus it helps formulate the idea in your head about what it is you're trying to do with your artwork, what it is you're trying to say. So yeah, it might be a very big topic to type in, but we can talk about it briefly, about what it is you're doing in your work. One of the things you're struggling with, frustrated by, but I'd really like to hear some of your enjoyments as well in your artwork. What is it you're doing? Megan Fold Creative, was it Megan Folden? No, Creative? Foldenau? Is that how I said it? Forgive me if I've pronounced that. I probably have pronounced it terribly, so apologies for that. But yeah, tell me about your artworks, about what it is you're doing. Other artists that you, current modern artists that you are inspired by. I'm always interested to hear new art about new artists. There's some incredible artists out there who have amazing quality in a location where they're at, or who might be shown in certain galleries that I'm not aware of. The world is a big place, and there are some amazing artists out there. And one of the things I love about social media is that I have